Hello again and welcome to our latest video here on the YouTubes. My name is Jay Tate. I am publisher of auburnsports.com, and thank you for watching our video. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the Auburn basketball team, which is going to play their first conference game this weekend at Mississippi State. One of two undefeated teams in the country, 12-0 right now, are the Auburn Tigers. Also, the San Diego State University Aztecs also are undefeated, and I say that because I grew up in San Diego, well, early in my life, and wanted to go to San Diego State, but it didn't really work out. So it's kind of weird that worlds are colliding like this. Yeah, that's the way it goes sometimes. Anyway, guys, we do these videos on the YouTubes to supplement what we do at auburnsports.com, and if you like this, please subscribe to our channel here. It costs you nothing, and if you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. So let's take a look. I want to start off with a few things I want to talk about this team. Everybody thinks they're undefeated, they're going to be great, they're going to go undefeated, they're going to get back to the Final Four. I want to tell you guys that getting to the Final Four ain't easy. And this team, although undefeated and playing pretty well right now, certainly has some areas where they need to grow a little bit before they get into the postseason and make anything like the kind of run that they did last year. I think any conversation about where this team is versus last year's team needs to start with these shot charts. So let me pull up the first one here. This is their aggregate shot chart from last season. And what it tells me, if you look at it there, is beyond the arc, you see 36.6 on the left, 32.1 in the middle, and then 39.4 on that right side wing. And then you also have the corners too. But generally, last year's team was a great three-point shooting team. They did some other things well. They were really good in transition, and defensively they could do some things as well. But really what it came down to was their three-point shooting. They were one of the national leaders in three-point shooting, 38.1% as a team, which was top 5% in the country, and that really propelled them all the way to the Final Four. Let's take a look at the shot chart this year so far. On the left there is this year's team. And you can see they've taken a step back in every single zone outside the three-point line, some significantly so. Down about 5% across the board everywhere, except in that left corner. It's more like 20%, but whatever. That's not where a lot of the shots are coming from. This current Auburn team is not a great three-point shooting team. They have a few guys that are really good shooters. Jamal Johnson, who comes off the bench, has surprisingly been very good at three-point shooting. He's above 40% now. And Samir's been solid as well. But outside of that, they don't have a lot of sharpshooters. And so they're having to change what they do a little bit. One thing I do want to point out, when you're looking at these two shot charts together, again, the old one or last year is on the right. The current one is on the left. They are really good around the bucket this year. They've actually upped themselves, 5% there. A lot of that has to do with Austin Wiley, Auburn's big, beefy, tall center, who has been an absolute menace near the bucket this year with tip-ins, with dunks. And when he can get the ball in the post and actually initiate a post move, he's pretty damn good down there. And Anthony McLemore's been good there as well. Plus, you have Isaac Okoro who's able to finish at the rim. And Samir's had more opportunities to finish at the rim, and he's made the most of them for the most part this year. But this team is better around the rim, but they're definitely taking a step back outside the three-point line. And I think that's something that we've got to keep in mind going forward, that if this team is going to be great, and they're going to improve throughout the SEC season and get good in the postseason, they're going to have to follow a slightly different script because they just don't have the three-point shooters that they did last year. I'm going to go ahead and leave that current shot chart up, and we'll just leave it there as we kind of move our way through. Let's take a look at the Auburn roster grid. I like to do this every time we do a basketball video and remind you guys of the playing rotations. Nothing has changed about this since the first one I showed you guys in the preseason. I kind of knew what I was talking about. I got help. But anyway, I did add percentages onto this one. It gives you an idea of the percentage of available minutes that those guys play. Anybody who plays 80% or more is somebody that's playing like basically all the time. I mean, Tez Robertson back in the day used to play like 93%, but that's an unusual situation. Anybody over 75 is playing quite a bit, actually, I should say. Javon, 73% at point guard. Samir at 79%. He plays a lot because he is the starting shooting guard, and he also backs up at point guard. You see Ty Jones is the third-choice point guard. He doesn't really play very much. He played a little bit in this game against Lipscomb. But the thing was, he was a combo guard in high school, and Auburn was kind of thinking that he would be able to come in and become a full-time point guard. And that really hasn't worked out, not because Ty hasn't worked hard, they just kind of feel like his skills probably match better at shooting guard or as a combo guard, not as a full-time point. And that's not going to be a problem for Auburn going forward because they've already signed Sharif Cooper, who's one of the best point guards in the entire country, one of the best players in the entire country for next year. And he'll be the number one point guard next year. And we'll see how Ty Jones works out. I think he's going to be kind of a combo guard. This idea of him being a shooting guard, I'm not seeing that right now because I don't think of him when I watch him in practice and scrimmages. He doesn't strike me as a great shooter. But listen, people get better. Jamal Johnson's a great example. When he was at Memphis, he was a so-so shooter. And now he's like 45% from three here. So people can't take a big step forward. At small forward or the wing position, Isaac Okoro's getting 73% of the minutes overall with Devin Cambridge backing him up. Devin has really surprised me with his bounciness and his spirit. Man, he plays really hard. And he can do a lot of different things. And I think he's going to be a better three-point shooter in time. I think he's at 32% right now, which is not great. But I think he's got the ability to be better there. D'Angelo at the what I would call the post position or the four, the stretch four, is 66% of the available minutes. The reason he hasn't had more is because he's been a little disappointing. He was good in the Lipscomb game the other day, but it seems like at this point he's kind of a put-up three guy and give you some rebounds, and he's great in transition, and that's about it. He's not giving you a lot of rebounds night to night. He's not giving you a whole lot of defense. And his three-point shooting, even though he's been putting them up, he hasn't been making them all that much. He has a beautiful shot. He has a quick release. He has a good arc on it. His mechanics look great, but he just hasn't been hitting a lot. And they need him to step up there. And he's gone in some funks that have led to him not playing as much. And them going smaller with Isaac playing there and different kinds of things. But D'Angelo seemed to get on track the other day against Lipscomb, and they're hoping that's the kind of performance that'll get him really, really heated up as the SEC season begins. Austin Wiley, who I think is the story of the year so far. And the reason I say that is you can see he's getting 49% of available minutes. That's a huge step up for him. If you remember him last year, man, he was hurt a lot during the season. He was struggling with his fitness as the postseason got going. And he also had a lot of trouble defending without lunging. His feet were slow. And he was getting called for fouls like literally every minute and a half on the court. They couldn't let him play more than 10 minutes a game because he would foul out. He has adjusted that so well. His fitness is unbelievable right now for him. He's the fittest he's ever been. He's healthy. And he's shuffling his feet a lot better on the defensive end. In fact, his fouls created per 40 minutes right now is under 5, which means if you wanted to play him 40 minutes, which you wouldn't normally do, but if you did, he probably would be able to go without fouling out, which is a huge step forward for him. His technique is a lot better, and he's able to play. You say, well, is that a little bit low? No. I think that's exactly where they want Austin Wiley. They don't want him out there 30 minutes a game. He's never been that guy. He's a huge human being, and I think they like the way that it's blending out right now between Austin and Ant inside. Jamal Johnson is now the backup at shooting guard. He plays a good amount. Had a good night the other night off the bench, 14 points against Lipscomb. I think he was 3 of 5 from three-point range. Anyway, he is their leading three-point shooter, and he's been pretty good. Again, I mentioned it earlier. He surprises me a little bit because when he was at Memphis, he wasn't a great three-point shooter. But he's been better than I expected as far as that goes. I think if he were to give a little bit more on the defensive end, he would play even more than he does right now. Devin Cambridge has been a surprise at that wing position, backing up Isaac. Very bouncy. Starting to learn how to take his remarkable athletic gifts and turn them into tools, particularly on the defensive end. You can kind of see where he was making some crazy decisions early on in the season, and he's getting it, man. You can see him getting better. And he has an unusual shot. He's kind of twisted when he shoots. He's not aiming right at the bucket, and his legs are kind of cockeyed a little bit. It's not the prettiest shot. It reminds me of Clyde Drexler in some ways, if you guys remember him from the 80s and early 90s, played for the Trailblazers. Really good three-point shooter, just had a weird motion. Devin reminds me of that. Ant has been really, really good. I think of him personally as a stretch 4 because that's what his game is like. But he also plays some center for them when Austin's out of the game. And he's been doing the things that you would expect Ant to do. He's a pick-and-roll guy. So he'll set the screen, ball comes over him, he slides to the side, gets somewhere along the three-point line, they get in the ball, and he shoots. They do that 2 or 3 times a game, and he hits a lot of those. I think he's at 34% from 3, which is great for a stretch 4. He's also a good spot-up shooter where maybe Javon goes into traffic, kicks the ball out for their power forward or center who's standing at the three-point line. Boom, knocks it down. It's weird because I thought that was an experimental thing when he was starting to work that three-point shot a couple years ago, but it's become a central focus of what Ant brings to the team, and he's been good at it. Again, Ty Jones, the third choice point guard. I don't think we'll see a lot of him this year. Al Flanagan's been actually surprisingly good backing up both. He can really back up at any of those three positions at shooting guard, wing, or power four, stretch four, I should say. Not a good three-point shooter at this point, 10%. I think he'll be better at that. A little bit of a lefty. I think if given to his own devices, he's probably more of a driver and finish at the rim kind of guy. But at this point, he gets some shots from three-point range. He hasn't been hitting a lot. He gives you a lot of spirit on the defensive end, though not necessarily a lot of performance. And he's just kind of getting going. But he brings a lot of energy and vigor, and I think that's worth something to Bruce Pearl for sure. So that is the lineup chart. Hasn't changed much at all. Jalen Williams played a little bit the other night. A very intriguing player for the future. Left-hander, stretch four, has a really pretty shot, but I think just not ready right now. Certainly not ready to take away minutes from D'Angelo, Ant, or Austin Wiley. And then Stretch, who is a tremendous talent. I think he's going to be really good in time. Just not quite ready yet, and certainly not ready to chip away at the minutes for Austin Wiley and Ant in the post. All right, so there's the roster grid. Moving on, we're going to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of this team as they go into SEC season. These are my weaknesses from my perspective, and I know a lot of people will say, hey, JG, this team's undefeated. Why are we going to harp on weaknesses? Well, we're just going to kind of work through these to start with. I'm trying to give you a balanced overall view of what this team's got and what it doesn't have. I think this team needs more bucket getters. Samir Dowdy has been a bucket getter. He gets a little spazzed out at times, yes, but he's a guy who will take the ball and he'll do something with it when this team needs it. The thing is, you need more than one. When you're going into SEC season and you're playing against the athletes they have, these SEC teams, and these coaches that are a little sharper maybe than some of the ones that Auburn's played against so far, they will have ways to take Samir out if they need him. Now, it's going to come at a cost. It's going to have less defensive coverage for somebody else or somebody's else. That's the thing that made Auburn so dangerous last year. You had Jared, you had Bryce, you had Chuma, you had Malik. All of them could burn you, and that's why I made it hard defensively. At this point with Auburn, I think if a team like Ole Miss or Kentucky that's good defensively, I think they're going to find ways to really limit Samir, and so somebody else is going to have to step up. And I have my doubts about who's going to be able to do that if they'll be able to do it at all. Second thing is free throw shooting. Auburn is at like 60. Here, I got the numbers right here. 65% this season, which is bottom 10% in the country. They were at like 72 last year, which is middle of the road. And you think, well, who cares, Jay? 5%? What's the deal with that? Well, listen, if you're taking 25 a game, you add that up over a month. Let's say that's 10 games. It's 250 free throws. I mean, 5% of that's 12, 13 points. Makes a difference in these close games, man. They've got to be better free throw shooting. The funny thing is, a lot of them have been fine. I mean, D'Angelo's always been a good free throw shooter, and he's been good. Samir's been fine. It's just that Javon is at 40% or something like that. Allen is below that. Al Flanagan is. He doesn't get to the line a bunch, but, I mean, that's his game, I think, when he's in there. Those guys have got to step up, particularly Javon, because he's going to go to the line a fair amount. He's always got the ball in his hands. He tends to be a downhill driver. And last year, he was a fine free throw shooter. He's been that way his entire career. He's just got something in his head right now, and he's got to get over that. And he's kind of pulling the whole thing down. I don't mean to make this a shit on Javon situation, but Javon has lacked consistency this year. They rely on their point guard in this system a whole lot to do everything. I realize that a lot of teams do, when you think about, football teams always say, well, who's the point guard of our team or whatever, because everybody knows the point guard is the clearinghouse for what's going on. But Auburn puts even more pressure than most on the point guard to do things. And Javon, I feel like they've kind of just thought that they would slide Javon into the same spot that Jared had and expect similar results, and that just hasn't been the case. Javon has a different set of strengths. And honestly, to this point in the season, he hasn't shown a whole lot of strengths. I mean, he's been average at spot-up shooting. Obviously, his free throw shooting's been poor. His ball handling's been solid. He had some lapses early in the season, but he's been good as far as that goes. But BP was just saying the other day before the Lipscomb game, he felt like the team doesn't get in the sets that he calls often enough. And listen, man, that falls on the point guard. I mean, when he huddled the team together before that, the last practice before the Lipscomb game, he was like, listen, We've got to run more of my stuff. And you've got to listen to these point guards. And point guards, you've got to do a better job communicating to these guys what we're doing and getting them in position. That's part of your job. And he's talking to Javon when he says that. Javon was great in the St. Louis game. But other than that, it's kind of been not so great. I put PNR ball handler paradigm. So what this is last year, a big part of what they did, no matter what year it is, a Bruce Pearl team's going to get out in transition, and they're going to spot up shoot. This is just how it works. But the third thing, and they daggered the hell out of people with this last year, was a pick and roll ball handler. So you set a screen. It's a pick and roll situation. The ball handler rolls off of the pick and roll, and then Jared would usually go to the cup, or maybe he'd pull up for a three or whatever. He was great coming off that paradigm. Also, Bryce was even better at it. They didn't ask him to do it a whole lot, but when he did it, he was great. So he's the ball handler. He goes off the pick and roll, and then he does something, a scoring play of some kind. Maybe he gets to the hole, he gets fouled. Maybe he gets to the hole and he finishes. Maybe he takes a mid-range. Maybe he takes a three, whatever. Javon's not good at it. And Samir's even worse at it. Samir's a spot-up shooter, and that's what he is. When he was at VCU, before he came to Auburn, he was a guy who drove to the hole, and he was great at it. But he doesn't really do that as much anymore. He did it against Lipscomb, but when we're playing against SEC teams, I don't think we'll see as much of that from Samir. He's a spot-up shooter. Javon's probably at his best as a transition guy, even though he hasn't been great in transition this year. I think he's just kind of eat up with the administrative elements of his job, and it has affected his performance. I just wonder if they should be running this as much as they do now, because they just don't have the personnel to run it as effectively as they did last year. I understand that you're going to call a lot of pick-and-roll ball handler roles when you've got guys who are really good at that, but Auburn doesn't have that right now, and I wonder what they're going to do to kind of fix that. Part of it is that they're great at offensive rebounds and stickbacks, and so they don't necessarily mind the missed shots as much, or the funky drives to the hole that aren't going to go in, because Austin Wiley can clean that stuff up. He's been so good at that. One of the best in the country. And Anthony's been really good about it too. But I still wonder why they keep calling those kinds of plays when they're just not very good at them. And then three-point shooting, thing we led off with. They're just not great three-point shooters at this point. I mean, Jamal's the best guy. Samir's the second best. Third best is probably Ant. I mean, do you really want your stretch four to be your third best three-point shooter on the team? I think he's 32, 33%. I mean, he's good for a stretch four, but he's not the guy you want to be your featured three-point shooter. My goodness. The next thing I want to take a look at is this Javon versus Jared Harper thing that I was talking about earlier. Jared obviously should have been a first-team All-American. He was, in my opinion, the best point guard in the country last year. He did have more experience under his belt at Auburn than Javon has. I'll take that. I'm not trying to turn this into a let's rag on Javon thing, because I like Javon and he plays really hard. He's got his head in it. He never causes problems. I just think he's preoccupied with getting the ball distributed and getting things set up in his own mind. Like, okay, we're running, let's say Auburn runs 2 up, which is a play they run a lot. Actually, they do it like that. Just making sure he's getting the guys on the floor where they're supposed to be, and it takes away from his ability to be a playmaker. Whereas Jared, it was second nature to him, and he didn't really care. He knew those guys could do it. And plus, Jared and Malik had been there long enough where they would go to the right places. Points per game. Javon's, 5? Approximately 4.5 off of Jared's numbers, whatever. 2-point field goal percentage. Javon's a little bit better than Jared was, but the number's a little misleading because Jared did it more often. And he really was good at finishing at the rim and getting to the free throw line. Jared was, even though he was kind of a slight dude, he was fearless when he went to the hole. And Javon generally was last year, but you don't see him doing it as much this year. 3-point shooting, which Javon was surprisingly good at last year. I think he was 54% from three. He's down to 33 now. Big step back at 3-point shooting, and he just isn't much of a threat there, really. We talked about the pick and roll ball handler. This is points per possession. 0.712 for Javon this year, which is a little bit below national average. 0.990 last year for Jared, which was like top 10%. Big difference there. Big difference there. And I also want to mention that Bryce was like 1.09 or something like that as a pick and roll ball handler guy, which was top 2 or 3% in the country. So you had 2 guys that were great at that now. And now Javon's about national average and Samir is below that. And yeah, it's kind of messy. Points per possession in transition. Jared was at .936 last year, which is very good. That's like top 15%. And then Javon is at .889 this year, which is probably more like top 30 to 35%. So a step down there as well. The thing is, I mean, I don't want to try to compare these guys, but it's like Pearl sets it up this way. He's taken Javon and tried to put him right in the hole, right in the box where Jared was last year. And Javon is not Jared. And another thing I want to say about Javon is if you remember, first of all, Auburn didn't expect Jared to be gone. Like Bruce Pearl and his staff definitely 100% thought that Jared Harper would be the point guard at Auburn this year. I'm not talking about 2 days before he chose to go to the NBA. I'm talking about when they were developing this roster a year ago or a year and a half ago. They expected Jared to go the distance. And they're not mad at him at all. I mean, the whole goal of this program at this point is to get kids playing professionally. Jared thought it was time, and Jared has hung in the G League. He's been good. He's had a chance to play a little bit with the Suns as well at the NBA level. So, I mean, no one's being critical of Jared for leaving. They just weren't expecting it. And they signed Javon because he was willing to come on and be Jared's backup. And Davion Mitchell, if you guys recall, he bounced because he felt like he was never going to get a chance to play with Jared playing the way he was, developing the way he was, and he thought Jared would be here a while too. Davion, incidentally, transferred to Baylor and is now the starter for a good Baylor team. Auburn wish they would have him back, that's for sure. But so Javon was supposed to be a backup, and he's in a featured role now, and he's not quite measuring up. And I don't think it's fair to sit here and give him too much hell about it, but just keep in mind, he's definitely not Jared. They're expecting him to be like Jared, I think, and it's not even really fair to him. Let's take a look. Let's get a little positive here. The strengths of this team, spot-up shooting. Auburn still has guys that I think are going to be really good spot-up shooters in time. Obviously, Jamal, that's what he's doing now, and he's been really good at it. He probably needs to get more shots. He is a backup, and he's going to be a backup, but he can play a little bit more. I think if he would step up defensively, they would probably be more comfortable with him playing 20 to 25 minutes a game. But as it stands right now, they feel like he's defensively not quite where he needs to be. And he's not helping in a lot of other ways on the offensive end. Transition, he's been just kind of okay. And then operationally, like I'm talking about on cutters, ISOs, he's just not really that guy. He's a spot-up shooter, but he's good at it. Samir's a spot-up shooter by trade. Dangel's a spot-up shooter by trade. Ant is a spot-up shooter by trade. So, I mean, they've got the guys. And I think if Dangel can get his three-point shooting up a little bit, if Samir can be a little bit more accurate from three-point range, they're going to be okay. They're going to get this shot chart straightened out. They're going to be better. They're going to space better. It's going to work out. That's my opinion. Getting to the line. This team does a better job than the last year's team at getting to the line. Now, last year's team was a lot about spot-up shooting and transition. This team has some guys that can attack in the half court. Samir, again, his heritage at VCU was good. He was a great guy about getting to the hole and either getting fouls or finishing at the cup. He's had more opportunities to do that this year, and he's been good at it. I wonder if he's going to do that more against the SEC teams. I don't know if he has the explosiveness to get away from defenders in the SEC, but we're going to find out. Isaac is a guy who can go to the hole and finish. Anthony's been better about that this year. Austin is a guy who just collects fouls. I mean, I don't even know in the SEC there's going to be guys that can defend him all that well in the post. And while we're at it, I want to talk about Austin for a minute. If you look at him like points per minute or whatever, or when they actually get him into a situation where he can initiate like a move to the bucket, he's elite. They can't get the ball to Austin. And you think, JG, how can they not get the ball to Austin? He's a huge target. You know where he's going to be. The problem is that the defense knows where he's going to be too. And Auburn's guards and wings have not played very much in their careers with dominant post players. And they haven't spent a lot of time in their careers getting the ball inside to a dominant post player. Because a lot of these guys have grown up in the positionless era that started, 8 years ago or so. And they're used to just rolling. Whether they're going to weave up top or they're going to roll off screens or going to DHO or whatever they're going to do. And so when Auburn runs a play for Austin, and you can watch this, I guarantee they'll do it against Mississippi State. They do it every single game. You'll watch the guard lock in on Austin. Like they're not sly about it. If they rotate the ball around to get the ball into Austin, once it gets to the point where someone's got to make that inlet pass to Wiley, they'll lock in on him, and then they'll pass it. And the defense knows what they know. And they're able to get over there and either deflect the ball or muck up the pass. And then Austin's catch radius isn't really huge. If they can get the ball into Austin with the ball here and he can make a move, he's really good. But Auburn really struggles to get the ball to him. And it's easy to blame Austin and say, oh, his hands are bad and his hands are not great. But Auburn's got to do a better job at giving him a shot near the post. They've got to be better at it. They practice it. But guys like Samir and D'Angelo and even Isaac too, they just lock in on him too much. And it makes it too easy for the defense to read it and mess it up. Transition defense, I think a lot of this is because BP's been here so long that everybody in this system right now, transition is in their DNA. It's a fit team. They run a lot in practice, and they spend their whole lives thinking about transition opportunities, how to get out in transition, how to space in transition. And I think once you spend so much time doing that, you get good at defending it because you think about it from your own perspective of what pisses me off when I'm in transition. Well, I hate it when defense aligns this way or cuts off this lane or blocks this read. And so they kind of do it. They apply those lessons on the defensive end. Auburn's been good in transition defense this year. Offensive rebounding, big part of it is Austin Wiley. He's something they didn't have last year. He played a little bit, but he wasn't very effective. This year, he's very effective. He's averaging almost 11 points per game, and he doesn't even play that damn much. And he's a great rebounder. He almost has 10 rebounds per game. He's almost a double-double walking in the door. And he only plays probably 20 minutes per game, 18 minutes per game. He's a tremendous player. He's been a good offensive rebounder this year. McLemore, to me, has been more like the guy he was before the injury. You know, he's really tentative last year, and I kept thinking, what is wrong with him? He's better this year, and he's been helping a lot with rebounding. D'Angelo will slide in there a little bit too. Isaac will slide in there a little bit too. Good offensive rebounders when they want to be. Auburn's been good as far as that. And I will add Samir's spirit or valor. I don't know as though a lot of people would mention that, but Samir is such a fighter, and he never backs down from a challenge. Now, sometimes that gets him into trouble, man. He'll find himself in a cul-de-sac, and that's a spot where Jared would find some way to back out of it. Bryce, later in his career, as a senior, would back out of it. He would recognize a situation that was terminal. I don't know as though Samir sees that all the time. I mean, he starts going, and you can kind of tell he starts doing the behind the back or between the legs on an ISO. They call it open, where the post man is opposite where the ball is, and it gives him kind of a free space there to create. Samir will get himself into some bad situations, and he won't pull out of them, and it'll be a mess. But in general, Samir fights his ass off every single minute he's out there. He plays with an incredible intensity. I know he doesn't look it because he's not screaming and hollering all the time, but he is such a determined player that I think that rubs off on the team, and it sets a tone. Kind of the way Malik did last year. Malik was such a fighter and a marauder. He just he lifted everybody else's spirits with him. I think Samir does that, and I think it's crucial that Auburn has a guy like that. And you can't put a price on it. You can't put a value on it. You can say, well, Samir's not shooting as well from three, which I did earlier. But Samir's out there busting his ass every single minute. And that means something. It really does. All right, guys, so there's a look at the strengths there. We're going to wrap it up there because we've been going forever. I didn't mean to go this long. I'm sorry. I do want to remind you guys, if you're not subscribers to auburnsports.com, you should be. If you think, hey, this JG, he knows a little something about basketball, hey, check us out. I write about it on the site. We talk about it on our podcasts and whatnot. We got BMAT and Nate are down at the bowl site. Auburn is playing Minnesota in the Outback Bowl. That will be contested tomorrow on January 1st, 2020. Golly, that's the year my daughter graduates from high school. My gosh. Anyway, I appreciate you watching this video, and if you're not subscribers to auburnsports.com, I sure wish you would be. If you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. If you have a comment, please leave it. I check these several times per day, and I'll be happy to interact with you guys if you have questions or comments about the video. And if you're not a subscriber to our YouTube channel, please jump in and do that because it's free, and it makes me happy. Until I see you guys next time, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars.